Hello, welcome to LaunchLeft podcast. I'm your host, Rain Phoenix. Don't forget to rate and subscribe. Follow us on all socials at LaunchLeft. Today's very special guest is JJ Kramer of Creem Magazine. I've been looking forward to this conversation and hope you enjoy it. We're on the podcast now with JJ Kramer from Creem Magazine, and we were just recounting having seen each other briefly at the screening at the Grammy Museum here in LA of the documentary film on Creem, the magazine, and really on your dad, Barry Kramer. Learned so much about him. One thing I noticed after the documentary that I thought was really interesting and evocative, specifically around how Creem has always been seen, was that you and Jan and Dave all were like rock stars. It was like one of that experience of seeing a rock show and everybody wanting to go check out and talk to the band after. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna let them do their thing, and but it made me so happy, and I love that about Creem Magazine. You guys have that reputation.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, the way I look at it is, it's just like folks have like such an affinity for the brand, right? Whether they grew up with it, whether they are just learning about it. There is something that just, there's this energy it gives off, and people want to be a part of it and want to chat about whatever impact it's had on their life. So that was really cool. It's just, I mean, it's almost surreal just from a personal perspective to kind of be in it now and to see that impact that it has.
My boyfriend is one of the people who was, got it religiously and read it front to back. And one thing he said was Creem was the only rock and roll music magazine that was often more rock and roll in attitude than the musicians they wrote about. Nothing was sacred, nothing off limits. They poked fun at everyone, including themselves. And I thought that was such a cool observation later, and talked about how he learned new words, and then the humor itself, the writing really did influence his writing. He's a musician and writes songs and all of that. And so how influential that magazine was to the youth of the 70s. And I think it's very admirable that you're rebooting in 2022 and I'm hoping to have some influence and create some excitement in this generation of young people.
Absolutely. And I think the beauty of rebooting it now is nobody has really filled the void that Creem left. In '89 when it folded, there's no real champion for like rock and roll, capital R. There's I think the genre as a whole has been like micro genre and micro niche to death, and there's like really cool blogs out there that are very specific, but there's not this big tent for everybody to gather under like there was for Creem 1.0, and that's what's really exciting for us, and that's what seems to be drawing people back in, is that there's a place where a fan of one genre and a fan of another genre can actually like coexist under the same tent, because they're both rock and roll fans, and that's a beautiful thing. And maybe we turn one fan on to another type of artist or genre, and vice versa. So it's really exciting. And I think the thing about Creem, and you were mentioning this earlier, is like it had this like DIY sensibility to it, and it had this blue collar sensibility to it as well. It humanized rock stars. It poked fun at rock stars. It ripped them off their pedestals if they needed, to be checked. On the flip side, it would champion bands that had never been put on a pedestal, and it gave all of them sort of this, equal footing. And you don't really see that a lot today, especially when there's a lot of click-driven media sites and things like that that are almost just programmed to regurgitate press releases and bullshit like that, because that's what drives the clicks. And so these bands that are actually really, really good aren't getting attention anywhere else. And so that to us is an incredible opportunity.
We second that. That is what LaunchLeft is all about too. Is like, let's find some more experimental, off the radar, and those that are recommended by people who have impressed us over the years, icons of sorts, especially the ones who did it their way and said no to like what they were told would get them somewhere and just chose to go their own route. So we salute you and so happy to be talking to you because you have that same sort of sensibility of like, it's not just what's popular or what's getting paid for. There's so much great stuff out there. The difficult thing is how do you sift and curate? And so that's what I love about Creem too, is it has that curatorial piece as well. So, and the irreverence is refreshing, especially in these modern times, which are, it's a bit of the post-cynicism modern times. And so it's an interesting time to reboot Creem as well, comparative to the 70s when kind of anything was a go. I'm so curious how you plan to approach the current sensitivities in the nation. I will say that I remember Dave Carney at the thing saying, "I can't wait to offend more people." Or something like that.
And then I think he said, and it's even easier today than it was,
right?
Back in the 70s. And, I think there's, like anything, Creem's evolved. There are things that, looking back, they weren't cool then. They're not cool now, but there is plenty of space to be irreverent without being mean or cruel. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're gonna live. And there's that's a big sandbox to play in. And you mentioned Dave, he's the perfect guy to be guiding us through there. Cause he definitely has that spirit, no doubt, of Creem 1.0, that irreverence, that not giving a, can I curse on here? Not giving a fuck. Yeah. So that's the guy we need at the wheel right now. For
sure. And I think Jan, is it Uhelski? Is that how you say her name? Who was a writer back in the original 1.0, like you said, Creem 1.0 in the 70s. And she was also at the documentary, and she's also part of sort of overseeing that it maintains the same acerbic bite, but also she mentioned something about there was some things I regret saying back then. So she's kind of like quality control around that kind of writing in a way. That's
exactly what she's doing. I mean, Jan's known me since, my entire life and has been along for, all of the Creem journey. And it was really important to have her involved. Just as sort of I always just refer to her as Creem's spirit guide, for lack of a better term. That's what I mean. It's quality assurance. It's does this pass the thumb test? Could this piece be printed somewhere else, or is it, uniquely Creem? And nobody would know that better than one of the people that invented it.
Speaking of Jan, she knew your dad, Barry, and I know. We haven't talked yet about this, but what a responsibility. First of all, I'm very familiar with loss. I think everyone who's lived a certain amount of years is on this planet, and how difficult it is to lose someone that you love very much, and especially at a young age. And so, even that on its own, to have lost your father so young, and then to be bequeathed the chairman title of Creem Magazine at age 4. And what that kind of weight / excitement maybe as you grew older, but the weight of responsibility around honoring someone who's gone, that you have your own attachment to and so much connection to, it must have been a lot. And I'm guessing, I know you went on to be an IP lawyer, which is pretty square in the Creem world, right?
Yeah, right.
But that has helped you in many ways get Creem back, right? So I'm just curious, I assume from my own experience, but I want to see if that rings true, and if you want to share a little bit about how difficult that must have been to carry that all this time, and what it feels like now to sort of to be the chairman, and it's this many years later, just from an emotional perspective.
Yeah, it has been a lot. For me, because I was so young when my dad passed away. It's like he's inextricably intertwined with Creem. I can't separate the two. I like it. Just to me, they've always been together. And so when it comes to Creem, it's always been, when I talk about wanting to be a part of Creem and carry the legacy forward, I'm not just talking about the magazine, the book. It's him. It's
Right.
him that I'm honoring by doing that. And there were definitely times growing up where, like, I don't know, I felt like at times I was running away from it, and at times I was running directly toward it. And there were a lot of ups and downs in getting to this point, in reacquiring the rights. And I think, most sane people probably would have walked away from it at sort of at its rock bottom. But like, I sort of realized that something, that I know not only felt like I had to do, but over time, like, I knew that I wanted to do it. I knew that, like, aside from honoring his legacy, which is incredibly important to me, like, it was something that I wanted to put my own imprint on. And hopefully have it be there for my kids, down the road as well. So it was a lot of, I think the documentary in a lot of ways was therapy for me. I probably should have been in therapy for the loss for a long time. I never was, but going through the doc process and hearing stories and anecdotes and learning about, like, the person, the good, the bad, the ugly, the crazy, all of that shit, gave me, like, a certain level of understanding and closure and all that, therapy that I was, probably subconsciously seeking. And now it's put me in a really good place to, like, thoughtfully move this thing forward.
Wow. Thank you. That was so articulate. I know what you mean. It's like, now you're can stand from the foundation of being your adult self, not necessarily sort of locked in, I got to do this for my dad. Now it's like he's part of it, but you are leading the charge, and that's beautiful that the doc kind of helped you do that. It shows again how influential and transformative art is.
It really is. It's so true. Like, I went into it like, having some inkling that it may have that impact, but it's not until you, like, go through the process of creating that art and then putting it out into the world too, which was terrifying. Now it's like sharing a whole part of yourself that a lot of people, like, that have even been close to me my entire life didn't know, and, like, sort of just being vulnerable on screen. But, like, that for me personally, that needed to happen. And I think in order to put, like, everything that we're doing into play and on a path to success, it also had to happen, because it's freeing in a way. It's like, that was the legacy part, preserving the legacy part. And I felt like we paid homage to, like, the countless people that made Creem what it was. And now it's like, we've done that, and it was received well, and people were happy with it. Now it's a little freeing. Like, let's pull this bad boy forward and see where it goes without as much weight. There's always going to be weight. I can't sit here and bullshit you and be like, oh yeah, there's no weight on our shoulders. We got a big legacy, that we're carrying forward, but it's just a little bit of a different perspective on it now.
Yeah. Well, and I think anytime you're doing something that, you're pushing boundaries of what's happening right now, it's a lot, it's a heavy lift, but why wouldn't you want a magazine that's like rock star journalists? Like, I don't feel that there is a good magazine like that right now, where you're having these stories that are both funny and, sardonic and just quippy and really intelligent and using great words. I mean, I've read some, I'm like, good for you. This isn't a rock magazine. And so now I understand, like, when my boyfriend said, like, as a kid, he learned so many cool ways of writing and thinking about things and the poetics of it because of the journalist in the magazine. And I love that you back then, and from the things I've read recently, and which, by the way, I think this might be a great time to segue into bringing your launched artist, Zachery. Yeah, I read his article on the Hooters and was laughing out loud. I mean, but also really enjoyed, engaged. So
Zachary joined us as editor at large for issue 1. I actually was not all that familiar before I was introduced to him through our editorial, our VP of content, Fred Pissarro. And I was like immediately just blown away by his style of writing. I think the first piece of his that I read that he wrote for us was about Wilco. And I don't claim to be a huge Wilco fan, but like his type of writing is so immersive. It reminded me of a lot of writers in Creem's initial iteration that just like made you feel like you were there, regardless of whether you were a fan of the band or not. It gave you a sense of what it did mean to be a fan of the band and what it did mean to be part of that experience. And that's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking to have this magazine have a definitive voice and a definitive cast of characters that you can count on to tell you about cool stuff that's going on. And like Zach just knocked it out of the park. He's got a really great sense of humor, as well as you see coming through on his Hooters review. We're just like thrilled to have him in the mix. He's incredible talent.
Hi, I'm Rain from LaunchLeft, and I think you know JJ here.
Hi, it's good to see you. It's good to see you both.
We were just having a chat about Creem Magazine and how freaking awesome it is. And JJ wanted to bring you on. I was telling him I read your article, the Hooters one, and I was laughing out loud. It was so great.
Oh, good. So, I'm glad. I never know, you know.
And I just was at the Yeah last night. Nick is someone I know as well, and I saw you wrote books with him.
Yeah, Nick is one of my oldest friends. I've been riding on his coattails for as long as he would let me.
They were so epic.
I can be there's a lot of drag involved. I love working with him. And that's before Creem, that was one of the things that kept me writing. So
I know that you're also a vocalist. I assume maybe you write lyrics, write songs, but that you've sung in some bands, been in some bands. But would you say journalism or writing is your first love, or do you have
No, fuck no. I failed. I failed as a musician, so I became a critic. But I mean, I've always liked writing. My father, who passed away this year, he was a mystery writer, and so I've always been a writer, and I've always loved writing. And but I didn't start writing about music till my 30s, I would say, and which I like to think makes me a better critic, because I'd like to think, again, that I'm sympathetic to artists, while not really romanticizing. Most of my friends are musicians, and like me, a lot of them are incredibly dumb, and we both, because we're all just in bands, and that's all we knew. We didn't read books. And anyway, the combination, I think, works in that I love music, obviously, passionately. And but I don't deify any of this stuff on either end. I think it's a conversation. I don't get mad when sometimes people get upset when artists get mad at critics, and I think there can be, obviously, with stan culture, it can be very ugly and can be cruel and bullying. But I also think that it is a conversation. I think that if you write a bad review, or if you say something unkind about an artist, and you should, if you believe that, then they get to respond.
Yeah, and I think it's important not to like you said, censor ourselves, or to censor really anyone. That's something that's definitely happening more and more, and I'm not a fan of that. I feel like we should have the conversations, the difficult conversations, for sure. We should have those, as opposed to just, let's not talk about it at all. To me, it always comes down to conversation. Yeah. And that's what I think sets you all apart, is even though it can be at times, I think, journalistically clever and fun, it doesn't come off like you're being mean-spirited and shitty.
I think that's a really important distinction because obviously I'm against censorship broadly. I tend to be sort of an absolutist about that, you know, but I also think that social mores change and shame serves a societal function. I think that there's a reason we don't talk the way we did in 1975, 1985, 1995. And I don't necessarily think, I mean, I think sometimes, yeah, it's censorship, and sure, I think some things get lost, but also, you know, and it depends on who's doing the speaking, and, you know, like not to descend into cliche, but, you know, power dynamics and things like that. And I think, you know, you want to be conscious of that while still realizing that life is short and you got to get your kicks, you know? So,
yeah. And I think, you know, what we noticed when we relaunched was like the audience was a little bit jarred that there was like real criticism coming, and there was almost like a learning period where people needed to better understand that like real criticism, it might sting. It might sting sometimes. That doesn't mean it's mean. That doesn't mean it's cruel. It means there's an actual opinion that's being, you know, put out into the world that you probably don't see in 99% of the other outlets. And, you know, I think back in the day, and this is what we're trying to get back to, is like there was like almost like this ecosystem between the fans, the bands, and the critics, and they all held each other accountable through the conversation. Is like, you know, a band would put out a shitty album, the critic would hold them accountable with their opinion. If the fans didn't like it, they would join the conversation and push back. And the beautiful thing about Creem is we published all of it. Like, whatever your differing opinion was, it, you know, if you came from a point like of you know, honesty and you know, perspective, it would make it into the pages. It would be a letter to the editor. It would be a review. It would be a feature. And that's been lost. And that's really what we're trying to get back to.
Yeah. And I mean, off what Zachary, you were saying, I get that there is this fine line, you know, that is a big responsibility for 2.0 to manage, which is that there are good reasons that the language has changed, that linguistically we've stopped saying certain things, even, you know, in our culture that weren't kind to all kinds of people. And I'm hoping that Creem can tease that apart and say, this is criticism and opinion and subjective, and it can be kind of silly and might sting, like you said. But we're not doing something in a way that's harmful either.
And I think a lot of these things go hand in hand with other things. You know, it's sort of like in the same way, not to go way out of my depth, but like to my mind, you don't have like abolition tomorrow. You have abolition with a number of other progressive movements that make these things feasible. In the same way, like, you know, you want to get to the, like, yeah, right now you'll see in a lot of music criticism, like there's a, you know, it's a lot easier to take shots at popular white dudes in bands, and cool, which is great. That's fine. And what you want to get eventually is get to the point where you can make fun of everybody, but only because everybody is being represented and everybody is writing these things. And it's, you know, it's sort of like,
right.
You can't just be like, well, I want to be able to say what I want to say. I want to make fun of everybody. And like, because free speech, man. Yeah. Not if you're still like covering some bands to the exclusion of others,
right?
Stuff like that. So it really has to go. Everything has to be moving. If I want to be the asshole that I really want to be,
right,
I have to be active in, you know, improving.
There is one other thing that I think will help people start to untangle all the stuff that's mushed together, and that's like, I think. A lot of people have already realized this, and I think more will over time, that like where we're coming from, where Creem is coming from, is from like, it's because our writers, our staff, our fans fucking love music. They want it to be good. They want it to progress. We want to pull things forward. And if that means somebody's got to be taken down a few notches for the greater good, then we're going to do it. The same way if we need to, run to the margins and champion, bands that aren't getting enough attention, we're going to do that too. So it's everything that we do is coming from the right place. It's not, we're not out there with doing hot takes for the sake of, just punching down and humiliating, someone. That's not what Creem was ever about. There certainly might be writers that have a very definitive opinion on a particular group and they want to get it out there, but it's because they care so much about the music. It's not fueled by, hatred or cruelty or anything like that. And so I think that's going to help folks get more comfortable with our style of criticism, and also our sense of fun as well. So it's like it's tongue in cheek. There's a wink and a nod. Bands learn to play along. Artists learn to play along. I said this in the doc, and I think it remains true today. It's like either you're in on the joke or you are the joke. And so I think we're that sensibility is very much part of what we're doing today.
Oh, well, I think that's all true. And I think that, in some ways, the way the culture has changed, in some ways, of course, it's very negative. But in other ways, it can be liberating because, all right, there's very little money in the music industry, except for on the very, very top, and I think in other music sites' defense, when the only currency is social currency, of course, you're going to be more attentive to like everyone's feelings because you're certainly not getting paid, so you might as well get invited to the parties and like be able to like get a line or two, and, but I think that since now there's like this focus on like the super, super popular, this thing that to my mind isn't so much about music, we don't even have to of course we want very, very popular artists, but then there's a certain like threshold that it just becomes almost like trying to like get the Pope to talk about things. And like, we can talk about music and talk about popular music and talk about music that millions of people love without trying to get into some weird like pissing match with like some like oligarchical pop star that doesn't, that's just going to sick, 7 million 15-year-olds or deranged 25-year-olds on us. It doesn't need to be done.
I'm definitely looking forward to 2022's version of Lester Bangs and Lou Reed, though. Come on. Let's get one. Like, there's got to be an artist ready for that out there. That would be so fun to see that back and forth go down. Now, it'd be really entertaining.
Yeah, and I think there are artists that are game for that, and I think. Maybe not to that extent,
Yeah, no, I know that was a little rough, but I mean, I just wanted to bring that up because that's a pretty great story.
I mean, that's what I think what a lot of people return to, and the thing is that Lester Bangs is an example of someone who was able to do that, and artists still adored him, and they still wanted to talk to him, and I think that's the goal. I think it's an attainable goal. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, just kudos to you guys because, I think we've been here launching Left for a few years now, just as a podcast and a label. But there haven't been that many people who are trying to not do what everyone else seems to be doing in music and art, which is go with like whatever is out there and just keep and look, it's, obviously working there. I think the money is going that way. So it's definitely hard to hold a line out somewhere else, I have to admit. But I've always believed that, how can we like striving to be more like our heroes, the ones that said fuck it to the norm and did it their way, and then created their own world with which everyone wanted to be a part. That's really, to me, the most inspiring thing about music and art, is that kind of maverick spirit in artists that do that, you know?
Well, what you're saying is really important, actually, because I think that is actually not to blow sunshine of you, but the idea of creating your own world is actually an essential part of it, because it can't be done in the negative. It can't just be reactionary. Right. It has to be a positive act. And I think that's what we're doing with Creem. That's what our goal is. You know, it's not just, yes, we are going to make fun of everybody, all our friends and peers, you know, and, you know, and then when we see them at the bar, kind of do this, but, because we don't want to do a lot of what other people are doing, though, you know, to be fair, some of it is quite good, you know, but we don't want to do what the mass of media is doing, but it can't just be a reaction against that. It has to be us, and which we're doing with every issue, with every week of the online stuff. We're striving to make our own world and our own niche, and find a voice that is indebted to and true to like the spirit of 70s Creem, but also not Civil War reenactment.
Well, I wanted to say I'm sorry for your loss with your father passing away. I just think loss is such a big part of all of our lives that often doesn't get talked about. But how do you feel that the loss in your life, whatever that has looked like, has been a cause of more creative freedom for you, and or more creativity? Or do you just kind of like compartmentalize that? No.
I'm going to be honest with you, not yet, because my mom died a couple of years ago too, and
I'm so sorry.
I'm still at the you know, abject rage part.
Right.
You know,
I get it.
And some truly awful poetry. But
I get it.
But yeah, we'll
Well, there's no special timeline. It took me 25 years, you know, to even really talk more about my brother. And I made a record and named it after him. You know, like it's the first time. It was 25 years later. You know, it's non-linear with time. You know,
I think about your brother a lot. I can't imagine, you know.
Wow.
So it's you know, he was very important to me as a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's just wild how you know, how we don't know how much those things affect us, or how much they, you know, it took me a long time to find the creativity in it. Just like, so when you say, I didn't realize you lost your mom so recently too. I mean, yeah. And JJ, he was 4 when he lost his dad. So we were kind of able to talk about it more from we've been through this over however 25, 30 years or whatever, you know?
Yeah. If I talk about it, I'm going to have to put the lipstick app back on.
Yeah. Okay. I get it. We don't have to go any more into that. We don't want that. Okay. So full-time job, Creem Magazine for both of you, or are you doing other things as much as possible? What is?
Well, I don't want to speak for Zach, but I would say, I hope we're both tracking towards a hopeful full-time gig at some point. I still have a day job as practicing IP attorney. You know, I say this all the time on our team calls. I'm insanely fucking jealous of the people that are actually working full-time for Creem right now. It's like been my dream my entire life. And you know, this is obviously a huge step, but I'm still kind of not quite there. You know, if it were 25 years ago for me, and didn't have a, you know, family and a mortgage, I might already be doing it full time, but I'm you know, taking my time on this one, but hopefully in the not too distant future. But I don't know how you feel about it, Zach.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, I had never, you know, I'd freelanced most of my life and bartended, you know, for 25 years, you know, and this is my first time going into an office and doing things like this. And I love it. Turns out I love it. You know, I think things that maybe would drive other people crazy, I'm like, another meeting? It's great. You know? Yeah, no, Let's go over the agenda.
Let's meet.
Let's hang out at the water cooler.
Yeah. We're like, oh, yeah. Hell yes, I want a sandwich from the deli. That's amazing. But yeah. So I love it. Because of like bartender hours and being in bands and stuff like that. I tend to write till about 5 a.m. and things like that. So it's still very all over the place. But yeah, no, this is how I see my future right now. So subscribe, everybody.
Yeah.
And bar.
And you're located all over the States now. I know it was a very Detroit Rock City magazine initially, but I love that it's also very modern and people working from different cities. And so that's interesting because you're bringing different cultural melting pots based on states into the magazine. You know what I mean? It's not just one city that it's real. I mean, it wasn't only that, but it has a little bit more of a wider
there's
reach.
A little more breadth now, but I think the important thing that I think everybody that's walked through the door has is it's like that, what I call like a Detroit sized chip on their shoulder. And you don't have to necessarily be from Detroit to have that sensibility, to have that attitude. I think everybody who is contributing has a little bit of that. And that's what's most important, is that spirit. And,
we are very angry and insecure.
Yes, exactly. That nails it. And in the magazine, we dedicate real estate every issue to like a Detroit centric column, greetings from Detroit. And we're going to be building on that. There will always be a connection and a bridge to Detroit, and it's going to grow over time. That's definitely important. We never want to forget where we're from.
And I think one of the things that really adds to that is, it would be ludicrous to sort of affect that we were in Detroit, pretending, like cosplaying that we were in Detroit while we're sitting in our like offices in New York. But JJ's there, and we sort of let that inform this constant reminder to not be coastal, just not be like LA and New York. We've covered the music scene in Tucson, which is amazing. We're going to do stuff like, over the years, like I want to talk about Pittsburgh, which is like a fucking awesome rock and punk town, like things that are not just like the usual places. And it's not, and I say that not in a condescending way. I say that in just an acknowledgement of that there is no center anymore. So let's find the Detroits everywhere and embrace them.
I love it. Do you have any form of give back or activism in regard to either the city that you hail from, or do you have any plans to have this do something to build?
Yes. Future state, I think, and there'll be a number of things that we do to give back to Detroit, whether it's making sure that we highlight artists from Detroit, have people writing and contributing that are boots on the ground in Detroit, opening an office there, hiring people from Detroit, and then future state, we do want to have a music festival that's based out of Detroit, that's in our plans, a Creem Fest, so to speak, a few years down the road, that brings people to Detroit, helps the local economy. It can be our way to continue to shine a light on all the really cool, amazing things that are going on down there. And that's just a part, a small part of it, but we're going to find bigger and smaller ways to always, like I said, have that bridge. It's really important to us.
Yeah, in a way that's like, so that harkens back that your dad's Creem, which is kind of cool. It's like a way to continue to honor the city where it started, in a irreverent way, I'm sure.
And I believe we also, and JJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the print magazine isn't available in record stores except for in Detroit.
That's right.
Yeah, we gave them copies, which
I love that.
And it's so. I mean, it's at least sort of focusing on that in some sort of way.
Yeah,
I think is important.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great call out, and we didn't we didn't sell them the copies. We just
Right.
sent them boxes and said, do with them what you will. Obviously, they were over the moon, and we'll continue to do that because it just feels like it's the right thing to do.
Cool. Well, you guys, this has been so fun. Thanks, guys. What a treat to talk to you. I feel like there's so many other things I wanted to ask. I hope I covered enough where it felt good to you. And
have us on again.
Yeah, it absolutely did. We had a great time.
LaunchLeft aims to create an intentional space that highlights and empowers all artists for whom radical creativity is not a choice, but a necessity. LaunchLeft begins with music, but its ultimate aim is to launch left-of-center artists in all creative fields.